Something is going on right now, and I think it's worth talking about. There is a lot of uncertainty in the world right now. Of course, the economy, AI, job security, what's going on overseas. And, the price of everything is going up. Don't even get me started on the fuel costs. And whether any of this is directly affecting you right now or not, most of us have a version of this same question somewhere in the back of our minds. And that question is, am I going to be okay? And what I've noticed both in my own life and with the people that I work with is that two people can be looking at exactly the same set of circumstances and have completely different responses. One of them gets clear, they make decisions, they focus on what they can control. The other spirals. It's like they've got 20 tabs open on in their mind. Every thought leads to another thought and another, and none of them are useful. It's like they're in the same world, but they're having a completely different experience. Now, the uncertainty is only part of what's happening, and by the end of this video, you're going to understand the other part. So, I'm going to show you what your brain is actually doing when life feels uncertain and why the things that most people reach for to manage it only ever work for a little while. Then I'm going to show you why or what uncertainty is actually pointing to, which is something that it's much more useful than what most people assume. And I'll give you a set of different questions to work with because the questions you're asking yourself right now are probably making things harder, not easier. So let's talk about the brain for a moment. Your brain has one job above everything else, and that is to keep you safe, right? To protect you. And part of how it does that is by constantly trying to work out what's coming next. So the brain loves predictability. It loves the familiar. It likes to feel like it can see around a corner, right? So when things get a little bit shaky, when the future suddenly feels less certain than it did, which it does, your brain does something very specific. It fills in the gaps, right? And here is the thing about that in particular. It doesn't fill them in with optimistic, lovely, best case scenario stories, right? Wouldn't it be wonderful if it did? But it doesn't do that. It goes straight to risk, right? What if this goes wrong? Or what if I'm not prepared? And what if I don't recover from it? And what if this one thing leads to 10 other bad things? I bet some of those things are quite familiar to you, right? And the more you sit in those thoughts, the more believable they become because your brain is extraordinarily good at building a case for whatever it already decided to be true. The result is that your body starts responding as though that story is already real, right? You feel it in your chest. It becomes tight. You have a busy head, snappy mood, poor sleep. And you are bracing for impact. Even though if you stopped and looked at your life right now, in most cases, nothing has actually happened yet. No one's lost their job. No bill has gone unpaid. No catastrophe has arrived. Nothing that you can't solve. But your body is already in response mode. And this is exhausting. Right now, the easiest way I've found to explain what's happening is this. Think about a smoke alarm. We all have them in our home. When it's working properly, it goes off when there is an actual fire. That's exactly what you want. That's it doing its job. But sometimes it goes off when you're making toast. Now, I know that that has happened to you. It's certainly happened to me, right? A crumb gets caught on the element, or you've forgotten to adjust the sensitivity setting, and suddenly the alarm is screaming like the entire house is about to go up in flames, right? But there's no fire, there's no real danger, but you never know that based on the incredible scream that is coming out of your ceiling right now, right? That's what a lot of people's brains are doing right now. The alarm is going off, and it is going off loudly. But the threat it's responding to is often a crumb, not a full-blown fire. Now, what most people do when they burn the toast, and set off the smoke alarm, and like I said, we've all done it, we grab a tea towel and we wave it in front of the alarm to make it stop. And it works for the time being, and we do the same thing when the alarm goes off in our brain. We tell ourselves to just breathe. We try to talk ourselves out of it. We distract ourselves. We push through. We keep busy. And it helps for a little while. And then the alarm goes off again, right? Because waving a tea towel doesn't change the sensitivity of the alarm, right? Nothing actually changed. You just silenced it temporarily. Then you go and make toast again. Another crumb gets on the element, it goes off again. Right? The real question, and this is where things start to get interesting, is what has caused your alarm to become so sensitive in the first place? And of course, by alarm, I mean brain. So this is where most of us get it wrong, right? We look at what is happening in the world and we think, well, of course I feel this way. Like, look at everything that's going on. And we wait for things to settle down so that we can feel better. And this isn't about saying there's nothing wrong in the world. I am not saying that. But the current uncertainty is simply exposing something that was already there in us. And what I mean by this is the way you respond to uncertainty, whether you go into worst case thinking or whether you get clear and practical, isn't really about what's happening in the world. It's about how your brain has learned to handle the feeling of not being in control. And that program, as we call it a program, it was formed long before this particular moment of uncertainty arrived. So when life gets a little bit shaky, you're not just responding to what you're seeing on the news or the economy or even the uncertainty itself in this moment. You are running a program, and that program has been there for a very long time, operating in the background, shaping how you think and decide and act without you realizing it. And what the uncertainty does is it strips back that busyness, that distraction, and suddenly it makes this program very visible if you're willing to see it. Now, what this means is it's this uncertainty that we're in is actually really useful information, even though it doesn't feel that way. So you might notice, for example, that you delay decisions when things feel uncertain. You're like, I'm not gonna decide on that right now. I'm just gonna wait and see what happens. Or that you try to plan for every possible outcome, which your brain calls being prepared, but which is actually just a very sophisticated way of worrying. Or it might be that you keep trying to solve things that haven't happened yet, and you're burning through enormous amounts of energy on an imagined future or imagined futures, which leaves you too exhausted to deal with what's actually in front of you right now. And once you see that, as I said before, once you allow yourself to see that, once you're willing to see that, you really can't unsee it. And that is where things begin to shift, right? This is the difference. So what do you actually do with this? Okay, well, the first step is simply to notice it, right? Instead of trying to push the feeling away or manage it into submission or just, ignore it, get curious about it. Ask yourself, what is my brain actually trying to solve right now? What is it asking me to pay attention to? I know this can get a little bit uncomfortable for some of us, but it's important that we ask ourselves these questions because most of the time there is something real underneath that spiral that we end up in. Like I said, a decision that you've been avoiding or a conversation that needs to happen. And the longer you put it off, the worse you feel about it, or something that you've been waiting for the right moment to address. The worry that we have is often pointing to something very real. It's just catastrophizing around it rather than dealing with it. And the questions that tend to help are very different from the ones that most people are asking themselves. So instead of the question, what if I lose my job? Or what if things get worse? Change that out for what needs to be done today? What conversation have I been putting off? What decision can I actually make this week that will influence what I need right now? What's real? And what have I added to it that's not? And that last question is one worth really sitting with because the uncertainty in the world is real, absolutely, and it's not going away. But the story your brain is telling you about what it means for you and what's going to happen and how bad it might get, that is something that you have added. There's no way you can know the answer to that yet. So you have added that, right? And you have far more influence over that part than you might think. So the thoughts might still show up. That's fine. That's your brain doing its job. They just don't have to be influencing your behavior and therefore the way that you feel the way that they currently are. So if there's one thing that I'd like you to take from this, it's that the uncertainty that you're feeling right now is only part of what's happening. The more interesting part and the more useful part is what it's showing you about how your brain has learned to operate, because that's the part you can actually do something about, regardless of what the world does next. So if this has made you curious about the program running underneath your response to uncertainty, I've put something together that can help you start looking at that more closely if you're willing to allow yourself to do it. All right, this takes courage. So it's only for the courageous. It's called What's in Your Suitcase. It's a short, free activity that helps you identify a belief that you've been carrying, the kind that shapes how you respond to things like this and decide whether it still needs to be true. And I've included the link in the description below so that you can download it. Thanks so much for watching today. I'm Rebecca King, and remember, when you change your mind, you change your life. Bye for now.